I'll smile. I know what it takes to fool this town. I'll do it till the sun goes down.
She wrote the songs that made the world dance, but she never wanted her face to be seen. At the height of her fame, Sia did something almost no pop star had ever dared. She disappeared in plain sight. Before the wigs, before the shadows, before the giant bows that hid her from the world, there was just Sia Furler, a brilliant Australian girl with a broken heart, a bottle in her hand, and a voice that could shatter souls. But fame, for her, wasn't a dream. It was a slow, suffocating collapse, one that nearly took her life. There's something deeply unsettling about how success nearly destroyed her. While the world sang along to Chandelier, few knew it was written during a suicidal spiral. While she penned anthems for Beyoncé, Rihanna, and Adele, she was hiding in hotel rooms, fighting addiction, grieving loss, and writing farewell notes. But Sia didn't vanish. She transformed. She rebuilt herself behind a mask, letting her art speak louder than her pain. Yet behind every dazzling performance, every strange and theatrical music video, is a woman haunted by her past and struggling to stay in control of her own narrative. This is not just the story of a singer who refused the spotlight. This is the story of a woman who turned her trauma into brilliance, who vanished to survive, and who left behind a trail of silent scars that still bleed beneath the surface. Born in Adelaide, South Australia in 1975, Sia Furler was never destined for an ordinary path. Her father, a musician, and her mother, an art lecturer, gave her a bohemian childhood, rich in creativity but fragile in structure. From early on, she was surrounded by music, chaos, and contradiction. As a teenager, she began performing with local jazz bands, her voice already raw and soulful, tinged with a sadness beyond her years. In the late 1990s, Sia moved to the UK and joined the acid jazz band 07. But her solo career began to quietly simmer beneath the surface. Albums like Healing is Difficult and Color the Small One revealed an artist with aching honesty and otherworldly vocal control. But it wasn't until 2011 that the mainstream world truly caught wind of her genius, not from her own songs, but through the mega hits she wrote for others. Behind some of the biggest tracks of the decade, Rihanna's Diamonds, Beyoncé's Pretty Hurts, and David Guetta's Titanium, was Sia's pen and voice. Yet the more her work exploded, the more Sia herself began to implode. Fame, attention, recognition, these weren't rewards, they were threats. They reopened wounds that had never fully healed. Sia suffered from addiction for years, both to alcohol and pills, quietly self-medicating to endure the expectations of an industry that chewed up vulnerability and spat out perfection. In interviews, she admitted she didn't want to be famous, she just wanted to make music. But by then, it was too late. Her name was everywhere, and her voice was unmistakable. And so, she built a wall. With the release of 1,000 Forms of Fear in 2014, she made a decision that would become her signature. She would no longer show her face. Instead, she wore oversized wigs, hid behind props, and let young dancer Maddie Ziegler become her proxy in public. It was a radical act in a business obsessed with visibility. Sia became the ghost of pop, everywhere and nowhere all at once. This wasn't just performance art, it was survival. Underneath the glamour of her reinvention lay a deeper, more disturbing truth. Sia was still carrying the weight of unspeakable loss, the death of her boyfriend, who was hit by a car just before they were to reunite. That moment shattered her, sending her spiraling into depression. She later admitted she had written a suicide note and planned her exit. But somehow, somewhere in that darkness, came music. And that music would become Chandelier, a song that sounded like a party, but was really a cry for help. As she rose higher, she retreated further. She built a fortress out of spectacle, used mystery as a shield, and turned anonymity into rebellion. But the world, ever curious, kept asking, what was she hiding from? What began as an artistic choice soon revealed itself as something far more complex. Sia wasn't just hiding from paparazzi or performance pressure. She was hiding from herself, from the wounds, the judgment, the shame, the fear of being truly seen. And as we'll discover, her disguise couldn't protect her forever. Before the wigs and the world tours, Sia was a fragile artist trying to be heard in a world that barely noticed her. In the early 2000s, she was singing in empty clubs, her voice cracking under the weight of songs that no one wanted to feel. Her albums, Healing is Difficult and Color the Small One, were deeply personal, aching with grief and loneliness, but commercial success eluded her. Even when Breathe Me was featured in the haunting finale of 6 Feet Under, it only offered a flicker of attention, nothing like the fame she was unknowingly spiraling toward. Her turning point came not from standing in the spotlight, but from stepping behind it. Sia began writing songs for others, songs that became global anthems. When David Guetta released Titanium in 2011, her demo vocals were never meant to be kept. But Guetta insisted on using them. The song exploded, and suddenly, Sia's voice was on every radio station, but her name was still hidden in the credits. That anonymity suited her. It allowed her to create without exposure. But the success was relentless. More artists wanted her touch, her pain, her magic. In just a few years, she helped craft hits like Wild Ones for Flo Rida, Let Me Love You for Neo, and Diamonds for Rihanna. Songs that shaped a generation, all written by a woman trying to remain invisible. But invisibility came at a cost. As the music industry began demanding more of her presence, Sia found herself drowning in anxiety. Her past traumas, addiction, the death of her first great love, childhood instability, rose to the surface. She coped the only way she knew, with pills, with vodka, with silence. By 2010, she had hit a wall. She became reclusive, avoided interviews, and contemplated suicide. Her pain, though quiet, was consuming. And then came Chandelier. Released in 2014, it was the song that would change everything. On the surface, it was a roaring, anthemic track about wild nights and reckless abandon. But anyone who truly listened could hear it. A woman on the brink, singing from the edge of the abyss. I'm holding on for dear life, won't look down, won't open my eyes. It wasn't a party song. It was a plea, and it resonated like a scream in a cathedral. The song's success forced Sia into the spotlight she feared. But she refused to play the game the industry expected. Instead of promoting herself, she promoted an idea. With her blonde bob wig and her decision to never show her face, Sia challenged the very notion of celebrity. She wasn't interested in being beautiful, marketable, or accessible. She wanted her music to speak for itself. Enter Maddie Ziegler. The young dancer from Dance Moms became Sia's onstage avatar, starting with the unforgettable video for Chandelier. Maddie, with her twitching, primal movements and vacant stare, embodied everything Sia felt. Chaotic, trapped, powerful, yet vulnerable. The collaboration was electric. They created a series of videos that blurred the line between music and modern art, performance and confession. But the success brought scrutiny. People began questioning their relationship. Why did Sia, a grown woman, seem so emotionally entwined with a child performer? Why did Maddie appear in nearly every video, tour, and interview, even though she was only a teenager? Sia insisted it was love, a kind of creative kinship. But whispers grew louder. The same public that once applauded Sia's reinvention began to murmur about control, obsession, and blurred boundaries. Still, the hits kept coming. Elastic Heart, Big Girls Cry, Alive, Cheap Thrills, each song a window into Sia's fractured soul, each performance more elaborate, more theatrical, more distant from the woman herself. She had become a symbol, powerful, mysterious, unreachable. But inside, the struggle never left. Fame had become both a platform and a prison. Do you want me to continue the next part? By the late 2010s, Sia had become an icon of contradiction, a household name whose face most people couldn't recognize. Her reinvention was hailed as revolutionary, even empowering. But behind the spectacle, she was unraveling again. The same demons that haunted her before, anxiety, trauma, addiction, never truly left. They merely hid behind the wigs and choreography. In 2020, the fortress began to crack. Sia made her directorial debut with Music, a film she wrote and produced, a passion project years in the making. The film told the story of a nonverbal autistic girl, played by none other than Maddie Ziegler. But instead of acclaim, it brought fury. The autistic community erupted, condemning the film's portrayal of autism as stereotypical and harmful. They were particularly outraged that Sia, despite her history of being sensitive, had cast a neurotypical actress to play the lead. Sia's response was defensive. Her tweets, angry and dismissive, only worsened the backlash. For a woman who had built her new identity on empathy, this was a devastating contradiction. The media, once fascinated by her elusiveness, now circled with sharpened claws. Critics didn't just attack the film, they questioned her character, her intentions, her right to tell such a story. The emotional collapse was swift and brutal. Sia later admitted that the backlash sent her into a deep depression. "I was suicidal and relapsed and went to rehab," she confessed. "I just felt like I'd ruined everything." In that moment, the mask slipped entirely. Behind the powerful voice and the oversized bow was a woman once again lost in her own pain. She had tried to tell a story about compassion, but instead she became the villain. And for Sia, who had spent so many years trying to stay invisible, being dragged into the center of a cultural firestorm was nothing short of soul-crushing. Even her once unbreakable bond with Maddie Ziegler came under fire. Some accused Sia of being overly possessive, using the young dancer as a vessel for her own traumas. Maddie remained loyal, even protective of Sia, but the public had already begun to turn. What once looked like a creative partnership now felt like a blurred line between art and obsession. But perhaps the darkest truth of all was this: Sia had always been running. From fame, from grief, from herself. In interviews, she admitted to having undiagnosed autism for years, only revealing it publicly in 2023. She spoke about her struggles with self-worth, her reliance on validation, and the way music had both saved and broken her. "I've been sober for nearly a decade," she said, "but the shame never fully goes away." And yet, the world kept singing her songs. Even as the media dissected her, fans clung to her voice, because in her pain, they heard their own. In Breathe Me, they heard loneliness. In Chandelier, they heard desperation. In Alive, they heard resilience. Sia never wanted to be famous. She wanted to survive. But the music industry doesn't allow survival without exposure. And no matter how large the wig, how grand the stage, the truth always finds a way to bleed through. Do you want me to continue the next part? There are few figures in pop music as complex, contradictory, and emotionally raw as Sia. She is, in every sense, an artist who both weaponized and was wounded by her own vulnerability. For Aussie Uncovered, her story is more than just an arc of fame. It is a cautionary tale about what happens when a fragile soul collides with the machinery of global entertainment. From an objective lens, Sia's accomplishments are staggering. As a songwriter, she helped define the sound of the 2010s. Her pen sculpted the emotions of millions, and her voice, piercing, aching, unmistakable, left an imprint few could replicate. But it is the tension between her genius and her pain that defines her legacy. She did not chase stardom in the traditional sense. Stardom found her, and she resisted with every fiber of her being. There's a haunting irony in Sia's journey. She created some of the most personal, emotionally exposed music in recent memory, all while hiding in plain sight. Her commitment to anonymity wasn't a gimmick. It was a defense mechanism, a survival tactic. In choosing not to show her face, she confronted the very culture that demands constant visibility, and in doing so, rewrote the rules of pop. But she is not without fault. The controversy surrounding music was a serious misstep, a moment where empathy failed, and ego may have spoken louder than understanding. It reminded us that even artists who swim in emotion can become disconnected from the people they claim to represent. Still, Sia's willingness to confront her errors, to publicly seek help and admit her fragility, speaks to her humanity. Aussie Uncovered does not view Sia as either a hero or a victim. She is both the architect and the casualty of her own mythology. Her story touches on the deepest questions of artistic identity. Can you create without being consumed? Can you bare your soul to the world and still protect your core? And most importantly, what happens when the songs that save others fail to save the one who wrote them? We invite our audience to consider, how do you perceive Sia now? Do you see her as a visionary artist, a damaged survivor, or a cautionary figure in the age of hyperfame? Does knowing the darkness behind the music change the way it sounds to you? Let us know. Because sometimes the most powerful performances come from those who are silently screaming behind the curtain. Do you want me to continue the next part? Some stars shine by standing in the spotlight. Sia chose to shine by disappearing. She built a legacy not by posing for cameras, but by bearing her soul through lyrics soaked in sorrow and resilience. She gave us songs that made us dance, cry, and feel less alone, even when she was breaking inside. Her voice became the voice of millions, even when her own face remained a mystery. And maybe that's the secret. Maybe the greatest power lies not in being seen, but in being understood. Today, Sia is still creating, still writing, still healing. Her journey is not a closed book, but a living melody, unpredictable, wounded, and beautifully human. The wigs may fade, the headlines may shift, but the echo of her voice remains, raw, defiant, trembling with truth. For every person who ever felt like they didn't belong, Sia became a mirror. Not perfect, not polished, but real. She never asked to be a pop icon. She just wanted to survive. And in doing so, she gave us something far more lasting than a celebrity moment. She gave us pieces of herself. Some stories are never told, but now you know. And somewhere in the silence after the final note, her voice still lingers, unmasked, undeniable, unforgettable.